My hands won't stop shaking. Not from fear, no. From something warmer. From the way I keep remembering a look I'm not allowed to want. From the quiet thought that keeps returning, too close. Karen Whitmore stood in the mirror of a narrow apartment bathroom and tried to make her breath sound normal. Her face looked calm, almost composed. The kind of calm that fooled people who didn't know what panic did when it learned to dress itself up as discipline. She pinned her hair back, then let it fall again. Long, dark, too glossy. Green eyes that always gave her away when she tried to lie. She practiced a smile that belonged to someone with options. She didn't have options. A damp towel hung crooked on the rack behind her. The sink still carried a faint smell of cheap cleanser, sharp, almost metallic. Her phone buzzed on the counter like a pulse she couldn't ignore. Unknown number. She knew exactly who it was. Karen stared at it until the vibration stopped. For a second, the silence felt like relief. Then her father coughed in the living room, wet and familiar. And that relief turned into something else. Obligation. Anger. Love that felt like a bruise you kept pressing to prove it was still there. She left the bathroom and stepped into the small, dim space that pretended to be a home. The blinds were half closed, letting in pale morning light and the sound of traffic somewhere beyond the building. On the table, an envelope sat beside a stack of past due notices. The envelope looked too elegant for this place. Thick paper, a crisp edge, a faint scent when she'd first opened it, clean, expensive, almost like new leather. Inside, a contract, a badge, a neatly printed schedule, and a wire transfer receipt for $25,000. The money had landed in her account so quickly it felt unreal, like someone had made a mistake and would correct it any minute, like it wasn't supposed to be hers. But it was, and she'd already spent it. Not on dresses, not on some fantasy of freedom. She'd paid the rent. She'd cleared the debt collectors who called 3 times a day. She'd sent money to the rehab clinic her father promised he'd take seriously this time, his voice hoarse and solemn and convincing. Until it wasn't. His eyes were bloodshot now as he sat on the couch, an empty coffee mug in his hands like a prop. His hair had gone gray faster than it should have. The man had once been charming in a reckless way. Now he looked like charm's aftermath. "You going somewhere?" he asked, as if she'd ever gone anywhere for herself. Karen picked up her keys. "Work?" He studied her face. "That fancy job?" "It's not fancy," she said. The lie tasted bitter, and she swallowed it anyway. He nodded slowly, like he was proud. Like he hadn't been the reason she needed this. Good. Maybe this time we don't." Her voice snapped sharper than she meant it to. He flinched, then tried to cover it with a shrug. "I was just saying." Karen exhaled. She should have softened. She should have apologized. But something in her refused. It wasn't cruelty. It was survival. She looked at the envelope again on the table, at the printed name on the top page. Susan Harrow. 52. A name that didn't belong to a person so much as to a force. The kind of woman who didn't ask twice and didn't forgive once. A woman who existed at the top of a world Karen had only ever seen through glossy magazine pages and grocery store lines. Karen had met Susan Harrow in a private room above a restaurant, where the windows didn't open and the air smelled like money and restraint. Susan hadn't smiled when Karen walked in. She'd looked her over with cold precision, like evaluating a product. "Sit," Susan had said. Karen had sat because the chair was there, because the room seemed to demand obedience, because the silence between Susan's words felt heavier than sound. Susan's hair had been pinned back, severe, silver, threaded through dark. She wore no obvious jewelry, only a watch that could have paid off Karen's entire life. Her face was elegant in a way that made you assume she'd never cried. Susan slid a folder across the table. "You're intelligent," she said, as if it was both compliment and warning. "You're also desperate." Karen's throat had tightened. "Excuse me?" Susan tilted her head. "We can pretend you're here for ambition if that helps you sleep. But you're here because your father can't stop ruining you, and because you're tired of being the one who cleans up the mess." Karen had felt heat rush to her face. Not embarrassment, something closer to rage. "You don't know me." Susan's gaze hadn't moved. "I know enough." She'd opened the folder and revealed the resume Susan had built for her. Impeccable. A degree Karen hadn't finished. References from places she'd never worked. Recommendations written in perfect, polished language. like a biography of someone who had never been scared. "This gets you into Rosanna Vale's house," Susan said, and the way she spoke the name made it sound like a target painted on a wall. Karen had recognized the name immediately. Everyone did. Rosanna Vale, 46, CEO, global leader in luxury cosmetics, blonde, beautiful in that unreachable way that made headlines. The kind of woman who walked into rooms and changed the temperature. Susan leaned back slightly. "There's an opening for domestic staff. A cleaner. Live-in. Security cleared. Background check." She paused, letting the words settle like a net. "I can get you hired." Karen had stared at the papers. "Why me?" Susan's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Because you can disappear into a room and still be noticed. And because you won't get sentimental." Karen had swallowed. "What do you want?" Susan's eyes had flicked toward the window, where the city glittered like a promise nobody meant. "Information," she said. "Schedules. Meetings. Vendor lists. Early product formulas. Anything worth more than loyalty." Karen had felt her stomach turn. "That's..." Susan lifted a finger, calm, silencing. "Illegal, yes. Immoral, possibly. Effective, absolutely." Karen had tried to stand. Susan's voice cut through her movement. 25,000 now, Susan said. "And more when you deliver." Karen had frozen. Susan's gaze had sharpened. "Your father's debts are loud. The sort of loud that attracts dangerous attention. I'm giving you a quieter kind of danger." Karen's lips had gone dry. "And if I refuse?" Susan's voice had softened in a way that made Karen's skin prickle. "Then you'll keep losing. Slowly. Publicly. And you'll still end up desperate just without the resources I'm offering." Karen remembered the way Susan's hand had moved then. Smooth, deliberate, sliding the wire transfer confirmation across the table like it was already done. "I'm not asking you to love me," Susan had said. "I'm asking you to be useful." Karen had taken the money. Now the reality of it sat on her kitchen table in the shape of an envelope and a new identity. She slipped her phone into her bag and stepped outside into the hallway, where the air smelled like old carpet and someone else was cooking. The elevator was broken again. She took the stairs. Each step felt like a countdown. By the time she reached the street, another message lit up her screen. "Susan, first day. Don't embarrass me." Karen's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She didn't reply. She couldn't afford to. A reply was a tether. She walked to the car service Susan had arranged, black, glossy, waiting like it had always belonged to her. The driver opened the door without looking at her too closely, like he'd been instructed not to. As they pulled away, Karen watched her neighborhood recede. Laundromats, cracked sidewalks, the corner store that sold cheap flowers and lottery tickets. She told herself she wasn't leaving it behind. She was just stepping out for a while. The city shifted as the car moved. Streets got cleaner. Buildings got taller. The air changed somehow, less exhaust, more polished stone and trimmed hedges. Her reflection appeared in the window, an outline of a woman trying to look like she had control. She thought of the question that had been looping in her mind since the restaurant. What does it cost to be saved? She'd always believed salvation was loud. Dramatic. A hand reaching down at the last second. But this was quiet. A contract. A door opening. A lie that could become a life. The car turned onto a long private drive lined with trees that looked curated, their branches arching like a corridor. At the end, the mansion rose in pale stone and glass, too still to be real. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a statement. Karen's breath caught. Too close, her mind whispered, though she didn't know to what yet. A security gate. Cameras. A guardhouse. The driver spoke through an intercom, gave a name, and the gate slid open with smooth inevitability. They rolled forward. The house grew larger, more detailed. Fountain. Courtyard. A wide staircase leading to double doors. Flowers arranged with the kind of intention that made you feel unworthy of walking past them. Karen's palms dampened against her bag strap. This wasn't a place you simply cleaned. This was a place you had to earn the right to exist inside. The driver pulled to a stop. "You're expected," he said, and for a second Karen almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Expected. Like she belonged. She stepped out, the air cool and scented with something soft. Lavender, maybe, or expensive soap carried on a breeze. Her shoes clicked against stone. She hated the sound. Too loud. Too human. At the door, a woman in a tailored black uniform greeted her with a professional nod. Karen Whitmore. Yes, I'm Elise, the woman said. House manager. Follow me. Karen followed, her eyes catching on everything. The gleam of the floor, the height of the ceilings, the artwork that looked like it belonged in museums. The house held its breath. Even the silence felt controlled. Elise spoke in calm, precise phrases. Your schedule, your duties, areas you are not permitted to enter without permission, security protocols, privacy agreements. She handed Karen a keycard and a printed booklet. You will be observed. Not personally. Systemically. Karen nodded like she understood. Like she wasn't already being swallowed by the magnitude of it all. They passed a hallway lined with framed photographs. Rosanna in gala gowns. Rosanna shaking hands with politicians. Rosanna with models and investors. In every image she looked composed. Unreachable. But the last photo was different. Rosanna on a beach, hair loose, sunglasses pushed up, laughing at something outside the frame. Her smile was unguarded. The woman in that photo looked younger. Softer. Like someone who could still be surprised. Karen felt something shift in her chest. Elise noticed her gaze. That was years ago, she said. Before the divorce. Karen forced her eyes away. She lives alone? Elise's expression remained neutral, but her voice softened a fraction. Her children are adults. They visit, rarely. A pause. The house is quieter now. Quiet. Karen understood quiet. Quiet was what happened when people left. They reached a service corridor. Elise opened a door that led to a smaller set of rooms. Clean, simple, still luxurious compared to what Karen was used to. A bed. A desk. A small bathroom. A window overlooking manicured gardens. This will be your room, Elise said. You start immediately. We're short-staffed today. Karen's mouth went dry. Today? Elise nodded. Rosanna Vale doesn't like disruption. Karen had the oddest impulse to smile at the name now, like it was a key she'd been given. Rosanna. Not Miss Vale. Not the CEO. A woman's name, in a house that felt like it had forgotten women could be real. Elise handed her gloves and a basket of supplies. Start with the west wing, guest rooms, then the main kitchen. Do not enter the private office wing. Her eyes held Karen's for a beat, sharp and warning. And do not assume you are invisible. Karen's throat tightened. I don't. Elise left. The door clicked closed. Karen stood alone, staring at the supplies in her hands like they were props in a play she hadn't auditioned for. She inhaled, slow. She thought of Susan's message. Don't embarrass me. And then, without meaning to, she thought of the photo by the hallway. The laugh. The loosened hair. The softness that had no place in a corporate war. If you've ever wanted something you shouldn't, you understand. Karen shook her head as if to clear it. She was here to work. To observe. To survive. She moved down the corridor, cleaning guest rooms with mechanical precision. Dusting. Vacuuming. Making beds so perfect they looked untouched. The work was familiar enough to ground her, hands moving, mind quieting. For a while, she could pretend this was just a job. But the mansion had its own gravity. Every polished surface reflected her back at herself, as if daring her to remember who she was pretending to be. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. She didn't look. Not yet. She kept cleaning. In the kitchen, the staff moved efficiently, barely speaking. A cook glanced at Karen, then away. No one asked questions. No one offered warmth. It made sense. Warmth was a liability in a place like this. Karen was wiping down a marble counter when she heard the sound, heels, measured, unhurried, approaching from the adjoining hallway. Conversation quieted without anyone saying a word. Karen's hand paused mid-stroke. Too close, her mind whispered again, and she didn't know why it felt like warning and longing at the same time. She looked up. Rosanna Vale stood in the doorway. Not in a gown. Not in a magazine pose. She wore a cream blouse, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and tailored jeans that somehow still looked expensive. Her blonde hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands soft around her face. She held a tablet in one hand like it was an afterthought. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the polished, untouchable way Karen had expected. Beautiful in the way a person becomes when they're alone too often and still manage to keep something gentle alive. Rosanna's gaze swept the room, quick, evaluating, then settled on Karen. It didn't slide off her like it did with others. It stopped. Held. Karen's throat went tight. Heat rose, sharp and immediate, like her body had recognized something before her mind could organize it. Rosanna's eyes flicked to Karen's name tag. "Karen," she said, and the way she said it was almost careless, almost intimate. Karen forced her voice to work. "Yes, ma'am." Rosanna's mouth twitched. "You don't have to call me that." She stepped closer into the kitchen, the sound of her heels quiet on the stone floor. "I prefer Rosanna, if we're going to be sharing a house." Sharing a house. Karen's fingers tightened around the cloth. Rosanna's gaze dropped to Karen's hands, gloved, tense, then returned to her face. "Is Elise overwhelming you?" Karen swallowed. "No. I'm fine." Rosanna tilted her head slightly, studying her like she was something worth noticing. "Fine," she repeated. "You look like someone who's learned how to be fine?" Karen's breath caught. "Not that. Not exactly." She should have lowered her eyes. She should have nodded and gone back to the counter. She should have stayed inside the role Susan had built for her. But Rosanna's gaze felt like sunlight on skin that hadn't been touched in years. It wasn't hungry. It wasn't cruel. It was attentive. Rosanna reached past her to pick up a mug someone had left on the counter. Her hand brushed Karen's wrist, barely, the smallest accidental contact. It was nothing, and it changed everything. Karen froze, the sensation radiating up her arm like warmth spreading in water. Rosanna didn't flinch away. She didn't apologize like she was afraid of touch. She simply looked at Karen again as if she'd felt it too. A pause hung between them, thin as glass. Rosanna's voice softened. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "We've needed someone steady." Steady. Like a compliment. Like a plea. Karen's heart hammered. She thought, absurdly, of Susan's contract, of the money, of the lies stitched into her resume. She thought of the boundary she was already standing on. Too close. Rosanna's gaze held hers one more beat, then she turned to leave. At the doorway she glanced back. "Elise can be rigid. If you need anything, tell her. Or tell me." Then she was gone, her heels receding into the quiet. The kitchen exhaled. Staff resumed movement. Someone turned on a faucet. The sound of water filled the space like an excuse to pretend nothing had happened. Karen stood still, cloth in hand, her pulse loud in her ears. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. "Susan, report tonight. Don't make me come looking." Karen's stomach twisted. She stared at the message until the words blurred, then slid the phone back into her pocket like it was hot. Her wrist still remembered Rosanna's touch. She pressed her gloved fingers against the spot, as if to erase it. It didn't erase. It stayed, warm, sharp, impossibly vivid. Karen looked toward the hallway where Rosanna had disappeared, and something inside her shifted, subtle but real. Not love. Not yet. Just the first destabilizing truth. This house was not going to be a clean job, and Karen was not going to remain untouched. The first night in the mansion did not bring sleep. Karen lay awake in the narrow staff bed, staring at the ceiling as the house settled into its quiet rhythm. Pipes sighed softly behind the walls. Somewhere distant, a door clicked closed. The silence here wasn't empty. It was curated, designed. Her wrist still remembered. She turned onto her side and pressed it against the cool sheet. It shouldn't have mattered. It had barely been contact. Accidental. Civil. But her body had reacted before she could reason with it. Too close. The phrase slipped through her mind again, softer now. Less warning. More recognition. She rolled onto her back and exhaled slowly. This was dangerous for reasons that had nothing to do with Susan, and that realization unsettled her more than the threat in her pocket. The next morning began with structure. Elise handed her a revised task list without warmth but without hostility either. "You'll assist with the library in the East Terrace today. Ms. Mad. Vale has calls most of the afternoon. Rosanna. Karen nodded. Yes. The library felt different from the rest of the house. Less curated for display. More lived in. A faint scent of old paper and something floral, subtle, expensive. There was a softness here the rest of the mansion tried to hide. Karen ran a cloth gently across the polished wood of a low table, careful not to disturb the stacks of open books. Margins were marked. Notes written in precise, elegant handwriting. She paused. One of the books lay open to a page about corporate ethics in emerging markets. A handwritten line in the margin caught her eye. Power without conscience corrodes everything it touches. Karen's throat tightened. She shouldn't read further. She did. Another note, smaller this time. I refuse to become what they expect. The handwriting felt personal, not performative, not for a boardroom. Karen stood there longer than she should have, cloth still in her hand. You can read it. Her spine straightened instantly. Rosanna stood in the doorway of the library, not angry, not accusing, just watching. Karen stepped back from the desk. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Rosanna crossed the room slowly, her heels soft against the rug. I don't leave books open if I want them hidden. Karen swallowed. I wasn't prying. I know. Rosanna's gaze lingered on her face. You're curious. There's a difference. Karen's pulse ticked higher. Rosanna moved closer to the table and rested her fingers lightly near the margin note. Do you agree with it? The question felt like a test disguised as conversation. Karen hesitated. With power and conscience? Rosanna nodded. Karen met her eyes, and something steadied in her chest. I think power reveals what was already there. Rosanna studied her, long enough that the air shifted. You don't sound like someone who's only cleaned houses, Rosanna said quietly. Heat climbed Karen's neck. People surprise you. Rosanna's mouth curved slightly. They do. Silence gathered again. Not awkward. Not empty. Charged. Karen became acutely aware of proximity. The way Rosanna stood just inside her space, not quite touching. The warmth radiating through fabric. The faint scent of her perfume, something soft with a sharp edge beneath it. Her body reacted again. Subtle but undeniable. Too close. Rosanna tilted her head slightly. Elise told me you worked hospitality before this. Yes. That's not the same thing. Karen's mind raced. I needed stable work. Is that what this is? Rosanna asked gently. Stability. Karen forced her breath steady. It's a job. Rosanna's eyes softened just slightly. Everything is more than a job if you look at it long enough. That felt like an invitation. Or a warning. Karen's phone vibrated in her pocket. The sound was small but violent in the quiet library. Rosanna's gaze flicked downward. You should get that, she said. I'll call back later. Rosanna's eyes returned to hers. Something unreadable passed between them. If you're needed, you shouldn't ignore it. Needed. Karen almost laughed at the irony. She pulled the phone from her pocket. Susan's name glowed on the screen. She rejected the call. The decision felt reckless. Rosanna didn't comment. She simply stepped around Karen to retrieve a book from the shelf behind her. In doing so, her arm brushed lightly against Karen's back. Not accidental this time. Deliberate. Karen inhaled sharply before she could stop herself. Rosanna froze. Their bodies were close enough that Karen could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of her blouse. The house was silent again, as if listening. Sorry, Rosanna murmured. But she didn't move away immediately. Karen's thoughts scattered. Don't lean in. Don't. Rosanna stepped back at last, but her eyes remained steady on Karen's face. Searching. Something had shifted. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Outside, the world continued. Staff moved through corridors. Deliveries arrived. The stock market ticked in invisible numbers somewhere beyond the walls. Susan sent another message. We need product timelines. Not silence. Karen stared at the text later that afternoon in the staff corridor, her pulse tight. She typed half a response, deleted it, typed again. Nothing she could say would slow Susan down. Her father called too. She didn't answer. The house was beginning to feel like a sanctuary and a trap at the same time. That evening, Karen was assigned to assist with dinner preparations. Rosanna rarely hosted midweek, but tonight a private investor was arriving briefly. Karen worked near the kitchen entrance, setting glasses, aligning cutlery with precision. She could feel Rosanna's presence before she saw her again. The investor left quickly, businesslike, distant. When the doors closed behind him, the house exhaled. Rosanna remained standing in the dining room, staring at the half-finished glass of wine in her hand. Karen hesitated in the doorway. Would you like me to clear this? Rosanna looked up, as if pulled from far away. Stay. It wasn't loud. It wasn't commanding. But it wasn't casual either. Karen stepped inside. Rosanna studied her again in the softer evening light. Without the structure of the day, she looked more human. More tired. You don't ask many questions, Rosanna said. Karen's lips curved faintly. That's usually considered polite? Or guarded? Karen didn't answer. Rosanna took a small sip of wine. Do you ever feel, she began slowly, like you're performing the version of yourself that other people find useful? Karen's chest tightened. Every day. Yes, she said simply. Rosanna nodded once, as if that confirmation mattered. It's exhausting. The honesty landed somewhere deep. Karen stepped closer to the table to gather plates, and the distance between them narrowed again. Too close. Rosanna reached for the same plate at the same time. Their fingers touched. This time neither pulled away. The contact lingered. Heat pooled in Karen's stomach, slow and spreading. Rosanna's thumb shifted slightly against her knuckles, barely there. Questioning. Karen's breath faltered. I should, she started. Rosanna's voice dropped lower. You should. But her hand didn't move. Karen felt it then. Clear. Undeniable. Desire. Not dramatic. Not explosive. But real. And terrifying. If you've ever wanted something you shouldn't, you understand the way the body betrays you first. Rosanna released her hand. The absence felt immediate. Go, finish, Rosanna said softly. Before I ask you something inappropriate. Karen's pulse spiked. Inappropriate? She echoed before she could stop herself. Rosanna's gaze darkened slightly. Not cruel. Not predatory. Interested. Yes. The word settled between them. Karen swallowed and turned to leave, but her steps felt unsteady now. The house seemed smaller. The corridors narrower. In her room later, she stared at her reflection again. She had come here to dismantle this woman's empire. Instead, she was memorizing the way Rosanna's thumb had shifted against her skin. Her phone buzzed again. Tomorrow. I expect details. Susan's message glowed coldly in the dark. Karen closed her eyes. This wasn't just about information anymore. This was about a line she was already standing on. And the terrifying part, she wasn't sure she wanted to step back. Karen started to understand the mansion the way you understand a person. Not by looking at it, but by living inside its patterns. Morning light fell through the same tall windows and drew pale rectangles across the hallway rugs. Staff moved like quiet currents, efficient and careful. Deliveries arrived at the same side gate, checked by the same guards, recorded by the same cameras that never blinked. Somewhere beyond the walls, headlines shifted, stock prices rose and sank, rivals plotted, and the world kept turning as if no one's breath ever caught in a kitchen doorway. And yet, inside this house, everything had begun to tilt. It wasn't dramatic. Not yet. It was the small, impossible detail that Karen couldn't undo. Rosanna Vale looked at her like she existed. Not as staff. Not as background. As a woman. Karen tried to outwork it. She polished surfaces until her hands ached. She folded linens with ruthless precision. She volunteered for tasks that kept her in the service corridors, away from the library, away from the dining room, away from any space where Rosanna might appear, and make the air feel heavier than it should. But avoidance had a cruel way of proving what you were avoiding. By the third day, Elise noticed. Of course she did. Elise doesn't miss anything, one of the kitchen staff whispered when Karen asked for extra work. She notices breathing. Elise found her in the linen room, snapping pillowcases into straight lines as if order could cauterize desire. You're moving too quickly, Elise said. Karen didn't turn around. I'm just trying to be efficient. You're trying not to be seen, Elise corrected, voice flat as stone. That's different. Karen's shoulders tightened. I'm doing my job. Elise watched her for a beat too long, then handed her a keyring with a single older key on it. Vale wants the west sitting room cleaned personally today. And the terrace doors. Karen's throat tightened. Personally? Elise's eyes sharpened. That word makes you nervous. Karen opened her mouth. Elise didn't give her space to answer. Be careful, she added, not unkindly. Not warmly either. Just precise. People mistake kindness for permission in houses like this. Karen's pulse flickered. I won't. Elise's gaze held hers a moment longer, as if weighing whether Karen believed herself. Then she left. Karen stood still in the linen room, key heavy in her palm. Too close, her mind whispered, but now it sounded less like a warning and more like a pull. The west sitting room was the kind of space designed for quiet power. Deep sofas, muted art, a fireplace that had probably never been lit out of need. The terrace doors opened onto a view of manicured gardens and a pale strip of sky. Karen moved methodically, cloth in hand, working along the shelves. And then she saw it. A blanket draped over the arm of the sofa, half folded, as if someone had pulled it around their shoulders and then stood up quickly. Beside it, a small bowl with an orange peel curled inside like a ribbon. A glass with a lipstick mark on the rim, soft, not theatrical. Evidence of a person. Rosanna. D. Karen's fingers paused on the glass. She shouldn't notice things like that. Not if she wanted to remain safe. Not if she wanted to do what Susan had paid her to do. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She didn't need to look to feel her stomach drop. She looked anyway. Susan, I'm done waiting. A second message followed immediately. Susan, tonight. Full report. Or I remind you who owns your freedom. Karen's pulse thudded hard once, like the body's first refusal. She stared at the words until they felt unreal, until the screen dimmed and she tapped it back awake like keeping the threat alive would make her better prepared for it. Her breathing was shallow. She forced it deeper. She had accepted the money. She had taken the contract. She had stepped into this house carrying someone else's agenda like a blade hidden under silk. And now she was the one bleeding. A sound behind her, heels measured. Not rushed. Not staff. Karen's spine went rigid. She turned too quickly. Rosanna stood at the doorway, watching her with that same calm attention that always felt like it went further than it should. Karen's body reacted before language did. Heat rose under her skin, immediate and humiliating. Her mouth went dry. Rosanna's gaze flicked to Karen's hand, still holding the phone. Bad news? Rosanna asked quietly. Karen's instinct was to hide it, to lie, to smile and pretend she was fine the way she'd always done. But Rosanna's questions had a way of dissolving pretense. She didn't interrogate. She simply invited truth to exist. Karen lowered the phone slowly. Just someone being demanding. Rosanna stepped into the room. Demanding isn't the same as important. Karen swallowed. It feels important. Rosanna's eyes softened slightly. You're young. People will try to convince you their urgency matters more than your boundaries. Boundaries? Karen almost laughed because she'd never had boundaries that anyone respected. Not her father. Not creditors. Not Susan. Not even herself, apparently. Rosanna moved closer to the fireplace mantel, absent-mindedly adjusting a framed photo. Her hand steady, her movements controlled. She looked like someone who'd learned to make every gesture mean less than it could, just to survive living under constant observation. You're shaking, Rosanna said. Karen tightened her grip on the cloth, trying to stop it. No, I'm not. Rosanna's gaze didn't flinch. You are. Karen's throat constricted. The room felt suddenly too warm. Rosanna didn't advance again. She didn't corner her. She simply remained present, like offering space was its own kind of intimacy. Karen forced a breath. It's nothing. Rosanna tilted her head. Nothing doesn't make your hands tremble. Karen's eyes stung, unexpected and infuriating. She blinked hard. No, not that. She turned away toward the terrace doors, pretending to check the locks. The glass reflected her face, composed, pale, too controlled. Her green eyes looked brighter than usual, almost feverish. Rosanna's voice came behind her, softer. Does this house scare you? Karen's laugh came out thin. Your house doesn't. Rosanna's silence was immediate, and in that pause Karen felt what she just admitted without meaning to. It wasn't the mansion that scared her. It was the woman inside it. Karen's fingers tightened around the brass handle. I should finish the room. Rosanna didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice had shifted, barely but meaningfully. You can. Later. Tone. Karen turned back, startled. Rosanna was closer now, though she still left a respectful distance. Come sit, she said, indicating the sofa with a small movement of her hand. 5 minutes. Karen's pulse jumped. I can't. I'm working. Rosanna's gaze held hers. I'm asking as your employer. A beat. And as a woman who can see when someone is about to break. Karen's chest tightened. The words landed too close to something raw. Karen hesitated, then sat on the edge of the sofa like she might have to stand quickly. Her posture was rigid, defensive. Rosanna sat across from her, not beside her. Not trapping. Not performing. She rested her glass on the table and folded her hands loosely in her lap. For a moment neither spoke. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked on somewhere in the distance, rhythmic and indifferent. The world doing what it always did. Rosanna exhaled slowly. I don't know what you're carrying, she said. But you look like someone who's been carrying things alone for a long time. Karen's throat moved. She stared at Rosanna's hands instead of her face. Pale fingers. Short nails. No rings. Not even the ghost of one. Divorce made visible in details. Karen's voice came out rough. Some people don't have a choice. Rosanna's gaze sharpened. You always have a choice, even if it's ugly. Karen's stomach twisted. Choice. The word sounded like privilege. She looked up to spite herself, and Rosanna's eyes were there, steady and unguarded in a way that felt dangerous. If you've ever been seen at the wrong moment, you know how it can feel like losing control and being rescued at the same time. Karen swallowed hard. I'm fine, she tried again, because saying anything else would be admitting the truth. She was slipping. Rosanna's voice dropped. You don't have to be fine here. Karen's breath caught. That sentence, simple, quiet, hit her harder than Susan's threat. Because Susan wanted her useful. Rosanna wanted her real. Karen stared at Rosanna and felt the internal fracture widen. A part of her that had been coldly obedient, strategic, focused on survival, began to crack under the pressure of tenderness. And tenderness was the most destabilizing thing in the world when you hadn't expected it. Her phone vibrated again. Karen didn't move. Rosanna's gaze flicked to it, then back to Karen's face. You can answer, she said gently. Karen shook her head once. No? Rosanna's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, more like concern. No, because you don't want to? Karen's voice came out honest before she could stop it. No, because if I do, it gets worse. Rosanna went still. The room tightened around that admission. Karen's pulse hammered. She'd said too much. Rosanna leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on her knees. Who is it? She asked, not demanding. Not prying. Simply trying to understand. Karen's mouth went dry. Her mind raced through consequences like a fast spiral. If she told Rosanna, she risked everything. If she didn't, she risked losing the only place that had begun to feel like safety. The question rose in her mind, private and morally sharp, and it cut her open. If I let her hold me while I'm lying to her, what does that make me? Karen didn't answer. Rosanna watched her for a long moment, then sat back again with a quiet resignation that made Karen's chest hurt. I won't force you, Rosanna said. I won't be another person who demands your surrender. Another. Karen's fingers curled into her palms so hard, her nails pressed crescent moons into her skin. The pain grounded her. Rosanna stood. Finish your work, she said softly. But... She hesitated, a rare crack in her composure. Don't disappear from yourself in the process. Then she turned toward the terrace doors. Karen's body moved before thought. Rosanna. Rosanna paused, hand on the door handle. Karen's voice shook. I'm not. She stopped, swallowed. Restarted. I'm not who you think I am. Rosanna turned back slowly. The air felt electric. Not because of drama. Because of what could be implied in that sentence. What could unfold if Rosanna asked one more question? Rosanna's gaze searched Karen's face. For a moment, Karen thought Rosanna might demand answers. Might press. Might crack her open. Instead, Rosanna walked back, stopping close enough that Karen could feel her warmth again, close enough that the space between them felt like a held breath. Too close. Rosanna lifted her hand, slow, deliberate, and brushed a loose strand of hair away from Karen's cheek. The touch was light, but it was not accidental. Karen's breath broke. Her entire body reacted. Heat, tension, a tremor she couldn't hide. Her eyes fluttered shut for half a second, a reflex of wanting. Rosanna's fingers lingered near her jaw. Then tell me who you are, Rosanna murmured. Karen opened her eyes. Rosanna was closer than she'd ever been. So close Karen could see the faint freckle near her cheekbone, the tiredness at the edges of her eyes, the softness she tried to keep hidden under power. Karen's lips parted without permission. Rosanna's gaze dropped, briefly, to Karen's mouth. A silent exchange, charged and undeniable. Karen didn't lean in. Rosanna didn't either. But the almost was its own kind of crossing. Rosanna's hand fell away slowly, as if she regretted removing it. "Not today," Rosanna whispered, voice thickened by restraint. "If you're not ready." Karen's heart pounded like it was trying to escape her chest. Rosanna stepped back, but her eyes stayed locked on Karen's face. "But soon," she added, almost too quiet to hear. "Because I don't think I can keep pretending I haven't noticed." Noticed. Karen's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. If she did, something would spill that couldn't be put back. Rosanna turned and left the sitting room. Karen remained on the sofa, breath unsteady, skin humming where Rosanna's fingers had been. Outside, the sprinkler continued its rhythmic clicking, water sweeping across the hedges with indifferent precision. Inside, Karen stared at her phone until her vision blurred, knowing the outside world wasn't going to pause just because her heart had shifted. Susan would keep pressing. The lies would keep tightening. And Rosanna's touch, light as it had been, had already changed the shape of everything. Karen finished the sitting room on autopilot. She wiped the terrace doors until her reflection looked like a stranger. She straightened the throw blanket Rosanna had left behind as if she could straighten what had just happened between them. She aligned a stack of books, hands careful, breathing uneven. And through all of it, her skin kept remembering the brush of Rosanna's fingers at her cheek. Not today. Soon. The word sat in Karen's body like heat under the surface, the kind that didn't burn you immediately. Just made you feel constantly aware of your own pulse. She returned to the service corridor and tried to disappear back into routine. The house was good at routine. The house was built for it. Cameras, schedules, doors that opened and closed at the same times, staff who moved quietly enough to keep the illusion that no one lived here at all. But Karen could feel the shift everywhere now. In the way Elise glanced at her once, and then looked away too quickly. In the way the kitchen staff fell silent when she walked in, like they sensed something had changed. In the way her phone felt heavier in her pocket, loaded, dangerous. By late afternoon, she had 3 unread messages. Susan didn't scream. Susan didn't need to. She tightened. "Susan, you're either loyal or you're disposable. Susan, don't mistake my patience for weakness. Susan, I'm calling at 9. Answer." Karen stared at the screen in the staff bathroom, the harsh fluorescent light making her look paler than she felt. Her reflection looked composed, but her eyes didn't. She washed her hands twice, as if that could cleanse the words. Then she locked the phone and slipped it back into her pocket like it was a blade. She told herself she would report something safe tonight. Something vague. A crumb. A harmless detail. She told herself she could keep both sides satisfied while she figured out how to pay back the money, how to escape Susan's grip, how to fix the mess she'd stepped into. But the lie didn't hold. Because Rosanna's touch had changed the stakes. And Karen could feel it in a way that made her stomach drop. She wasn't just risking a job anymore. She was risking a person. That evening, Rosanna didn't appear in the kitchen. She didn't cross Karen's path in the hallway. She didn't step into the library with her quiet questions and attentive gaze. The absence should have relieved Karen. Instead, it made everything sharper. It's what happens after an almost kiss, Karen realized. The body expects continuation. The mind spins. She was wiping down the stainless steel counters near the back of the kitchen when Elise approached, clipboard in hand, eyes unreadable. Vale wants tea," Elise said. Karen's heart beat too hard. "No?" Elise nodded, then added almost casually, "In her private study." Karen's fingers tightened around the cloth. "That area is restricted," Elise finished. "Yes, Ms. Vale is making an exception." "An exception?" Karen forced herself to breathe. "Okay." Elise watched her for a second, as if studying whether Karen understood what an exception meant in this house. Then she handed Karen a tray. "Tia, honey." A small plate with 2 shortbread cookies. Elegant. Simple. Intimate in its restraint. Karen lifted the tray with both hands. The porcelain rattled faintly, betraying her. Elise's gaze flicked to her shaking hands. "Careful," she said quietly. "Spilling is visible." Karen's lips pressed together. I won't spill. Elise's expression softened a fraction. Good. Then Elise stepped aside, letting Karen pass. Karen walked down the corridor toward the private office wing, her footsteps muted by thick carpet. The mansion felt even quieter here, like it held its breath differently. The walls carried framed awards, photos with politicians, global expansion maps. Power displayed with taste. At the end of the corridor, a door stood slightly ajar. Warm light spilled out, softer than the overhead hallway lights. Karen paused. Too close, her mind offered again. Except now it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like inevitability. She knocked once, gently. Come in, Rosanna's voice answered. Karen stepped inside. The private study was nothing like the rest of the mansion's public rooms. It wasn't staged. It was lived in, messy and quiet ways. Papers stacked on a desk. A sweater draped over a chair. A lit lamp that cast amber light across dark wood and leather. Rosanna sat at the desk, glasses perched low on her nose as she read something on her tablet. Her blonde hair was loose now, falling over one shoulder in a way that felt too intimate to witness. She looked up when Karen entered. And Karen's body reacted instantly. Heat rose under her skin. Her throat tightened. Her pulse ticked hard and fast. Rosanna's gaze moved to the tray. Thank you. Karen crossed the room carefully and placed it down on the side table. Her hands stayed too long near the edge of the porcelain, as if letting go of the tray meant letting go of the last excuse for being here. Rosanna stood. Not abruptly. Not demanding. Just present. She came closer, stopping near Karen's shoulder. The air between them felt thick. Soft. Karen kept her eyes on the teacups. On the honey jar. On anything that wasn't Rosanna's mouth. Rosanna's voice was low. You've been avoiding me. Karen's breath caught. I've been working. Rosanna's gaze lingered. Both can be true. Karen swallowed. I didn't want to distract you. Rosanna gave a small, humorless laugh. You think you're the only thing that distracts me? Karen's heart hammered. Rosanna's hand reached for a teacup, fingers brushing Karen's knuckles again as she lifted it. Not accidental. A tiny, deliberate touch. Karen's breath stuttered. Rosanna watched her reaction closely, as if confirming something she already knew. Then Rosanna lifted her eyes to Karen's face. Tell me what you meant earlier. Karen's stomach dropped. Earlier? When you said you weren't who I thought you were. Karen's mouth went dry. Her mind raced through consequences like a rapidly flipping deck of cards. She could lie. She could delay. She could say it was nothing, just insecurity, just a moment. But Rosanna's gaze didn't feel like pressure. It felt like an open door. Karen's voice came out strained. It's complicated. Rosanna nodded once. Then start somewhere simple. Karen stared at her. You don't understand what you're asking. Rosanna's expression softened in a way that made Karen's chest ache. I understand you're afraid. Karen looked away. Rosanna stepped closer. And I understand, she continued quietly, that you're not the kind of woman who gets afraid without a reason. Karen's throat tightened. Her phone buzzed. Once. A small sound, but it cut through the room like glass breaking. Rosanna's eyes flicked to Karen's pocket. Karen froze. Rosanna set the tea down slowly. Is that the demanding person? Karen's fingers twitched. Yes. Rosanna's gaze sharpened slightly. Do they control you? Karen flinched. Rosanna saw it. Her voice dropped. Karen. Hearing her name like that, soft, steady, made Karen's chest feel like it was collapsing inward. The fracture widened again. Karen's voice came out too quiet. I took money. Rosanna went still. Karen forced herself to continue, words spilling like she couldn't stop them now. Before I came here, for this job, it was a signing bonus, kind of. She shook her head quickly. Not from you, from someone else. Rosanna's expression tightened, not anger yet, processing. Someone else paid you to work here? Karen swallowed hard. I needed it. Rosanna's jaw set. Why? Karen's eyes stung. My dad. She stopped, swallowed, restarted. My father is sick in his own way. He gambles. He drinks. He ruins things and then swears he'll stop. And I keep paying for it because I don't know how to stop being loyal. Rosanna's eyes softened. That's not loyalty. That's captivity. Karen's breath caught. Rosanna reached up slowly and touched Karen's wrist. Gently. Anchoring. The contact was warm, steady, not possessive. Karen trembled under it. Rosanna's voice was quiet. Who paid you? Karen's pulse jumped. The name felt like poison. Susan, Karen whispered. Rosanna's eyes narrowed. Susan Harrow. Karen nodded. Rosanna stepped back slightly, as if the name carried contamination. She turned away toward her desk, a controlled movement that betrayed something underneath. Anger. Shock. Calculation. Karen stood frozen, breathing shallow, heart pounding. Rosanna spoke without turning around. Why would she? To hurt you, Karen blurted. To get information. To ruin you. Silence. Rosanna turned back slowly. Her eyes weren't soft now. They were sharp. Controlled. And somehow, that made Karen's stomach drop more than if she'd shouted. Rosanna crossed the room again, stopping close. Have you given her anything? Karen's voice cracked. No. Rosanna studied her face as if trying to read the truth beneath the panic. Are you lying to me now? Karen shook her head quickly. No, I swear. Rosanna stared at her. Then her gaze fell to Karen's lips, just for a second. The shift was subtle, but it was there. A reminder that this wasn't just corporate war anymore. This was personal. Rosanna exhaled slowly, like she was forcing herself not to react like a CEO, and instead react like a woman. You should have told me sooner, Rosanna said. Karen's eyes filled. I was going to. When? Rosanna's voice tightened. Not cruel. Not mocking. Just wounded. After you took what you needed? After you decided I was safe enough to be real with? Karen flinched as if struck. Because it was true. Karen's voice broke. I didn't plan to. She stopped. I didn't plan for you. Rosanna's gaze sharpened. That's the problem. Karen's breath caught. I'm sorry. Rosanna stared at her for a long moment. Then she reached out, slowly, and took Karen's face in her hand. Karen froze. Rosanna's thumb brushed lightly along her cheekbone, the same place she touched before, but now there was weight to it. Intention. Karen's eyes fluttered half-closed. Rosanna's voice dropped to something almost painfully intimate. Do you understand what you've done? Karen's lips parted. Her body answered before her mind could. Rosanna leaned in slightly, close enough that Karen felt her breath. Warm, white, faintly sweet from the tea. The almost kiss returned, sharper now, more dangerous because it didn't belong to possibility anymore. It belonged to choice. Karen's heart hammered. Her hands hovered at Rosanna's waist, not touching yet. Rosanna paused, eyes searching Karen's face. Consent silent but clear. Karen didn't pull away. Rosanna kissed her. It was not hungry. It was not hurried. It was a kiss that felt like restraint finally giving itself permission to exist. Karen's body reacted like she'd been holding her breath for days. Her shoulders softened. Her fingers curled lightly into Rosanna's blouse, seeking something steady. Rosanna's mouth moved against hers with quiet intention, slow enough that Karen could feel every shift of pressure, every breath shared between them. Warm, soft, and devastating. Karen made a small sound into the kiss, half relief, half fracture. Rosanna pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes darkened with something that wasn't anger. Something deeper. Then Rosanna kissed her again, slightly firmer, as if confirming reality. Karen's knees felt weak. Rosanna's hand slid to the back of Karen's neck, holding her gently in place. Karen's phone buzzed again. Once. Then again. The outside world, refusing to wait. Karen broke the kiss abruptly, breath shaking. She looked down, almost panicked. Rosanna didn't let go. Her hand stayed at Karen's neck, grounding. Rosanna's voice was low. Answer it. Karen's pulse spiked. I can't. Rosanna's gaze held hers. You can. And you will. Because she doesn't get to keep pulling you away from your own life. Karen's throat tightened. Rosanna. Rosanna's eyes softened slightly, but the steel remained. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, she said, voice roughened by emotion. But I'm also not going to let you drown in it. Karen stared at her, tears threatening. Rosanna released her slowly, stepping back just enough to give Karen space. Karen pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. Susan's name glowed again. Calling? Karen's thumb hovered over the screen. Her mouth was still warm from Rosanna's kiss. Her skin still hummed where Rosanna had touched her. Too close, her mind whispered, except now it felt like the truest thing she'd ever done. The call kept ringing. Karen looked up at Rosanna, breath shallow. Rosanna watched her with a calm that wasn't peace. It was readiness. Karen swallowed hard and pressed accept. Karen, Susan's voice came through, cool as glass. Finally. Karen's heartbeat thundered. Rosanna didn't move, but her gaze sharpened, like she was listening to every word through Karen's breath. Karen's voice came out tight. What do you want? Susan laughed softly. What I paid for. Karen's stomach twisted. Rosanna's eyes didn't leave Karen's face. Karen held the phone to her ear, hearing Susan's voice like a tightening noose, feeling Rosanna's presence like a lifeline. And in that suspended space between threat and tenderness, Karen realized the most frightening thing of all. She had crossed the line. And she didn't regret it. Karen kept the phone pressed to her ear as if it were the only thing holding the room together. Susan's voice had that controlled chill that never rose into anger because it didn't need to. It was the kind of calm that assumed obedience. The kind that turned other people into assets. What I paid for, Susan repeated, each word clean, clipped. You've had enough time to settle in. I want timelines, vendor names, any internal memos you can access. And I want them tonight. Karen's mouth was still warm from Rosanna's kiss. That detail, small, physical, undeniable, made Susan's demand feel like an intrusion. Like dirty shoes on white carpet. Like a hand reaching into something private. Karen glanced at Rosanna without turning her head fully, as if she couldn't risk breaking eye contact with the only steady thing in the room. Rosanna stood near the desk lamp, amber light catching the edges of her hair. Her expression wasn't soft now. It was calm in a different way. Focused. Strategic. Rosanna lifted her chin slightly. A silent instruction. Karen swallowed. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. I don't have that. Susan sighed, as if Karen were slow. Then you'll get it. Karen's pulse fluttered into a hard rhythm. She felt the pressure of it in her throat. Rosanna's gaze didn't waver. She stepped closer, not into the camera's view, not into anything visible beyond the study's private walls, but close enough that Karen could feel her presence like heat. Rosanna didn't touch her. She didn't need to. Karen forced a breath. You said this would be discreet. Susan's laugh was small. Discreet is a luxury. Loyalty is a requirement. Karen's fingers tightened around the phone. She hated the way Susan spoke about loyalty, like it was something you could own. Like it wasn't supposed to be chosen. I can't just walk into her office, Karen said. Susan's voice sharpened slightly, the first crack. You're in her house. Do not insult me with incompetence. Karen's stomach turned. Rosanna's eyes darkened. Not with jealousy. With recognition. Karen heard her own heartbeat and something else beneath it, an internal fracture widening into something she couldn't pretend wasn't happening. She was done being moved around like a piece on someone else's board. Her voice steadied as if it had been waiting for permission. If you want information, you'll have to wait. Silence on the line. Then Susan spoke, very softly. You're getting attached. Karen's skin went cold hot at the same time. Susan continued, almost conversational. It's always the same. People think softness is safety. They confuse kindness with weakness. Tell me, Karen, did you enjoy being seen? Karen's breath caught. Rosanna didn't move, but Karen felt the atmosphere shift, as if Rosanna heard every word and filed it away like evidence. Susan's voice lowered. Here's what will happen. You'll deliver. Or I'll make a few calls. The kind of calls that turns your father's little habit into a very public tragedy. Do you understand? Karen's mouth went dry. She should have been terrified. She was. But she was also angry. The kind of anger that arrives quietly, fully formed, and refuses to leave. Rosanna's gaze held hers, steady as a hand at her back. Karen swallowed. Don't threaten my family. Susan made a sound that might have been amusement. Then do your job. Karen closed her eyes for a second. No. Not that. She opened them and looked at Rosanna again. Rosanna lifted one finger slightly, just a fraction. Not a command. A suggestion. A plan. Karen's voice came out controlled, careful. Fine. I'll send something. They need to stop calling me. It's suspicious. Susan paused, calculating. Send it within 48 hours, and don't test me. The call ended. Karen stood still for a moment, phone still in her hand, as if the air needed time to fill back in around her. Rosanna approached without rushing. Are you okay? She asked quietly, and the question almost broke Karen more than the threat had. Karen's laugh came out shaky. No. Rosanna nodded once, as if honesty mattered more than composure. Good. Then we're dealing with reality. Karen stared at her. I shouldn't have kissed you. Rosanna's eyes softened, the steel still present beneath. Shouldn't is not the same as didn't. Karen's breath trembled. She's going to come after me. Rosanna's voice was calm. Let her. The simplicity of it made Karen's stomach drop. Rosanna. Rosanna lifted her hand, not touching yet, just holding space. Karen. You told me enough. Now you let me do what I'm good at. Karen's throat tightened. And what's that? Rosanna's gaze sharpened, turning predators into cautionary tales. The next 2 days moved like a storm you could hear coming but couldn't see yet. On the surface, the house kept its rhythm. Staff arrived. Meetings happened behind closed doors. Rosanna took calls and spoke in measured tones that revealed nothing. The world outside continued to spin. But beneath it, something changed. Rosanna had Karen brought into the study again, not as a servant, not as staff, but as a woman invited into strategy. Rosanna didn't romanticize it. She didn't pretend corporate war was anything but cruel. She also didn't punish Karen for the lie the way Karen had expected. Instead, Rosanna made an offer that felt almost unbearable in its maturity. Accountability without humiliation. We don't fix this by panicking, Rosanna said, sitting behind her desk with a file open. Her voice was composed, but her eyes were tired. We fix it by controlling the narrative. Karen stood near the window, arms folded tightly across her chest like she was holding herself together. Susan will keep pressing. She will, Rosanna agreed. And she'll get something. Karen's pulse jumped. You want me to give her... I want you to give her exactly what she expects, Rosanna interrupted, calm as glass. Confidence. Karen stared. That sounds insane. Rosanna's mouth curved slightly. It sounds inevitable. Susan Harrow doesn't move unless she thinks she's ahead. We give her that feeling. Karen's stomach churned. What if she... Rosanna rose and walked toward Karen slowly. She stopped at a respectful distance. Look at me, Rosanna said. Karen did. Rosanna's voice softened. You're not alone in this anymore. Karen's chest tightened. Rosanna continued, quiet but firm. You're afraid because you think you're still the only one paying the consequences. You're not. Karen's eyes stung. Why are you doing this? Rosanna held her gaze. Because I know what it's like to be cornered by someone who confuses control with love. A pause, a shadow flickering across her expression. And because I can't unfeel what happened between us. Karen's breath caught. Rosanna didn't step closer. She didn't reach out. She just let that sentence exist. It changed the air again. Karen's voice came out rough. I don't deserve this. Rosanna's gaze didn't soften with pity. It sharpened with truth. Deserve is for fairy tales. We're talking about choices. And I'm choosing you. Karen's knees felt weak. Rosanna turned back toward her desk and tapped the file. Susan will get a set of documents. Real enough to be believable, wrong enough to be fatal. We'll seed a false product timeline and a fabricated expansion leak. She'll run to the media with it. She always does. She thinks noise is victory. Karen swallowed. And then... Rosanna's eyes were cold with focus. And then she will be publicly disproven by the market and by audited confirmations from our partners. Her credibility will collapse in front of the same audience she tried to manipulate. Karen stared, heart pounding. You're going to... destroy her. Rosanna's voice stayed even. I'm going to let her destroy herself. I'm just holding up a mirror. Karen's breath trembled. What if she comes for me after? Rosanna's gaze lifted. She will try. A beat. And she will fail. When Karen sent the information to Susan, her hands shook anyway. Not because she doubted Rosanna's strategy. Because she could feel the line she was crossing inside herself. She was no longer pretending she belonged to Susan. She was no longer bargaining with fear. She was choosing a side. That choice didn't feel heroic. It felt like surrender to something truer than survival. Too close, she thought as she hit send. Except it wasn't warning anymore. It was admission. The fallout came fast. Susan's planted story hit online outlets within hours, dressed up with anonymous sourcing and fabricated insider language. The headlines spread with the kind of speed that fed on scandal. Commentators speculated. Investors reacted for half a day. Then the correction arrived. Not defensive. Not emotional. Clinical. Rosanna's team released confirmations. Partners issued statements. Timelines were proven false with documentation that couldn't be argued with. Analysts began to question Susan's credibility openly. And then, like a dam breaking, old whispers became accusations. Susan's name, already tarnished, became a synonym for manipulation. Her reputation didn't explode. It collapsed. In public. In real time. Karen watched it unfold on her phone from the staff hallway, the screen glowing in her palm like proof she hadn't imagined any of this. Her stomach turned, not with triumph, with a strange, hollow relief. Because Susan's power over her had always been more psychological than financial. Susan thrived on the belief that she could reach into Karen's life and squeeze. Now everyone could see Susan's hands. Rosanna found Karen later that night in the library where Karen had gone without thinking, drawn to the quiet, to the smell of paper, to the place where Rosanna's humanity had first felt real. Rosanna closed the door behind her gently. Karen looked up, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. It worked. Rosanna's gaze held hers. Of course it did. Karen's laugh came out shaky. You're not even surprised. Rosanna stepped closer. I'm surprised by one thing. Karen's throat tightened. What? Rosanna's voice softened. How much I wanted to come find you the moment I saw her name falling apart on my screen. Karen's breath caught. Rosanna reached up and touched Karen's wrist, bare skin this time, no glove. Warm. Real. Are you okay? Karen's voice broke. I don't know. I feel lighter and guilty. And, she swallowed hard, and terrified. Rosanna's thumb brushed once along Karen's pulse point. Good, she murmured. That means you're awake. Karen stared at her. She threatened my father. Rosanna's gaze hardened instantly. I know. Karen's stomach dropped. You know. Rosanna nodded. I had my security team look into it quietly. I'm not going to tell you what I found unless you want to hear it. A beat. But I will tell you this, she can't touch him the way she thinks she can. Karen's breath trembled. How? Rosanna's voice was calm. Because I took control of the leverage. Karen swallowed. What does that mean? Rosanna held her gaze. It means your father is in a clinic that doesn't answer Susan's calls. It means his debts are addressed in a way that doesn't create a new chain for you. It means you're not trapped by the same hook anymore. Karen's eyes filled instantly. You paid. Rosanna cut her off gently. I handled it. Karen shook her head, overwhelmed. I can't. Rosanna, I can't let you. Rosanna stepped closer, voice low. Karen, look at me. Karen did, tears sliding down before she could stop them. Rosanna's gaze was steady. You're going to repay me by living, by working, by building something that's yours. A pause. And by not disappearing from yourself again. Karen's breath shook. I don't deserve this. Rosanna's mouth curved faintly, not amused, just tender. Stop arguing with my choices. Karen's lips parted, helpless. Rosanna lifted her hand to Karen's cheek, thumb wiping a tear away with quiet patience. I'm not saving you, Rosanna whispered. I'm meeting you, there's a difference. Karen's chest tightened so sharply she could barely breathe. Then Rosanna kissed her again, slow, deliberate, consent held in the pause before contact. Karen leaned in this time. Her hands found Rosanna's waist, fingers curling into fabric like she needed proof. Rosanna was real. The kiss wasn't frantic. It wasn't hunger without thought. It was gravity. A soft, intimate taking of breath from one woman to another. A quiet agreement that something had shifted and couldn't be unshifted. Rosanna's hand slid into Karen's hair, holding her there gently, as if anchoring her to the present. Karen made a small sound, almost a sob, almost a laugh, into Rosanna's mouth. Rosanna pulled back just enough to rest her forehead against Karen's. You're shaking, she murmured. Karen's breath came out uneven. I'm scared. Rosanna's voice was almost a whisper. So am I. Karen blinked, startled. You? Rosanna's mouth curved faintly. Of course. Her thumb traced Karen's jawline, slow. I'm not afraid of Susan. I'm afraid of what this costs. Karen's throat tightened. What does it cost? Rosanna exhaled. Everything that's visible. Karen understood instantly. They couldn't be public. Not without turning their lives into a spectacle. Not without giving people permission to reduce something real to scandal. Rosanna's hand slid down to Karen's wrist again, holding it lightly. You'll leave the house, Rosanna said. Karen froze. You want me to go? Rosanna's eyes softened, pained. I want you safe, and I want us honest. Karen's breath trembled. I can't. Rosanna touched her cheek again, steady. Listen, Rosanna murmured. This isn't a punishment. It's a choice. You'll have a position in my company, a real one, not hidden behind staff doors. You'll walk through the front of buildings with your head up. Her gaze sharpened. And you'll decide who you are without needing to hide in my walls. Karen's eyes stung. And us. Rosanna's voice dropped. This doesn't end. Karen's chest tightened. But it changes. Rosanna nodded once. It becomes deliberate. Karen's breathing shook. Rosanna held her gaze. Do you think you can do that? Karen's answer came from somewhere deeper than fear. Yes. Rosanna's eyes softened. Good. The day Karen left the mansion, the air felt too bright. She didn't carry much. Just a suitcase, a box of personal things Elise had quietly helped her pack without comment, and a new contract folder with Rosanna's company letterhead on top. Elise stood by the service entrance, expression unreadable. You'll be on the executive operations team, Elise said, as if reading from a file. That's rare. Karen nodded, throat tight. Thank you. Elise hesitated, then added quietly. You did the right thing. Eventually. Karen's breath caught. You knew? Elise's gaze flicked away. I noticed breathing, she said again, almost dry, almost kind. Be careful out there. It's louder. Karen nodded. As she stepped outside, the mansion behind her looked the same as it always had. Immense, controlled, silent. But Karen was not the same. She got into the car waiting for her and felt her phone buzz once. A message from an unknown number. 2 words. We're not finished. Susan. Karen's stomach tightened, reflexive fear rising. Then another message arrived immediately after. A single line. Let her bark. I'm here. Rosanna. Karen exhaled shakily and stared out at the long drive ahead. Too close, she thought, not with panic now, but with something like acceptance. Too close to ever be careless again. Too close to ever pretend it didn't matter. Weeks later, Karen sat in a glass-walled office in Rosanna's headquarters, watching the city move below like a living organism. She wore tailored clothes now, not uniforms. She walked through lobbies with confidence she didn't entirely feel yet. Her badge opened doors that didn't lead to laundry rooms. Her father was in treatment. Quietly. Consistently. Not perfect, but not crushing her either. Susan's name still surfaced occasionally in industry gossip, always followed by a tone of caution. People didn't praise Susan anymore. They warned each other. The world kept moving. And in the middle of it, Karen and Rosanna learned a new kind of intimacy. Not the kind that lived in public. The kind that lived in chosen spaces. A private elevator after hours. A hotel room in a city where no one looked twice. A quiet house Rosanna owned under a different name, where the curtain stayed closed and the kitchen smelled like tea and oranges, and the soft burn of something real. Sometimes Rosanna would stand behind Karen as she looked out a window, and place her hands lightly at Karen's waist. No pressure, just presence. Karen would lean back into her without thinking. And every time the same thought would return, transformed. Not too close to ruin me. Too close to feel alive. One night, months later, Karen and Rosanna stood in that quiet house, shoes left by the door, coats dropped carelessly on a chair. Rosanna watched Karen remove her earrings, fingers slow. You're different, Rosanna murmured. Karen glanced at her reflection in the mirror. Different how? Rosanna stepped closer, stopping behind her. You don't look like someone waiting to be punished anymore. Karen's throat tightened. She turned slowly, meeting Rosanna's eyes. I still feel afraid sometimes. Rosanna nodded. So do I. Karen swallowed, voice low. Why do you keep choosing this, choosing me? Rosanna's gaze softened with something that felt like truth stripped of performance. Because you didn't just want me, she said quietly. You changed. You became someone who could hold the consequence. Karen's breath caught. Rosanna lifted her hand and traced Karen's cheek lightly, familiar now. And because, she added, voice roughened just slightly, I don't want a life that's only safe. I want one that's real. Karen leaned into the touch. She kissed Rosanna, slow, steady, as if sealing that choice again. Rosanna kissed her back with quiet certainty, hands warm at Karen's waist, breath shared like a secret neither of them needed to hide from each other. When they separated, Karen rested her forehead against Rosanna's and closed her eyes. The world outside kept moving. But inside, everything finally felt aligned. A soft, private victory. A dangerous, deliberate love. And Karen realized, suddenly, simply, that the most explosive part of the story hadn't been the infiltration. It had been the moment she stopped being owned by fear. A love like that doesn't announce itself. It just changes the way you breathe. And if you could choose again, would you still step toward the woman who made you braver, even knowing what it cost? Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If it moved something in you, subscribe for more quiet, cinematic WLW stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Karen's place?